The phone screamed at midnight, and Emily Hart answered on instinct, breath caught in her throat. A woman's voice asked, "Is Jason with you?" And the room tilted like a ship in sudden storm. Emily said, "Who is this?" But the line trembled with a soft laugh that wasn't kind. The stranger said, "Tell him to come home," and hung up, leaving a cold echo. Emily stared at the half-packed box labeled kitchen and felt the word home turn brittle. Jason had promised the drywall dust meant their future was close. He said, "We're almost there, Em," while brushing plaster from her hair. She remembered his hands steady on a blueprint, and the way he kissed her forehead like a vow. Her pulse thudded as she dialed back, but the number was blocked. The new house smelled like pine and wet paint, and every shadow looked like a secret. Emily whispered, "Don't be dramatic," and reached for the porch light like it could steady her. Wind slipped under the door, carrying night sounds that felt like footsteps. She texted Jason, "Are you coming?" and watched 3 dots appear, then vanish. Silence pressed closer, heavy and wrong. Emily pressed her palm to the cool window and watched the rain blur the street into watercolor. She said, it was probably a wrong number, but the lie scratched her throat. Jason's jokes about sawdust being glitter felt far away. She pictured their future dining room buzzing with friends, and the promise steadied her for a breath. A thunder roll made the walls tick like cooling metal, and she reached for the blueprint again. Emily said, "He loves me," and the words felt soft and frayed. She remembered the day they chose the light fixtures, his laugh warm and easy. The phone sat on the table like a witness that refused to speak. She typed, "Call me when you can," and sent it, the little whoosh too bright in the quiet. A drip from the ceiling tapped a slow metronome over the sink. She set a pot beneath it and stared at the ripple. Emily said, "This house is ours," and tightened her jaw. The radiator hissed, and the night leaned close, curious. She folded the blueprint with careful hands and waited for his headlights to carve the rain. The lock clicked, and Jason Cole stepped in with rain on his jacket and a smile that arrived too late. Emily said, "Who called me asking for you?" and watched his eyes skim the room like a thief searching exits. He laughed once, small and empty, and said, "Spam," as if the word could mop up dread. She pointed at the boxes and the drip and the blueprint, and felt anger tug at her calm. Jason said, "You're tired," and reached for her shoulder, but her body leaned away like a compass pointing elsewhere. He added, "Let me fix the leak," and grabbed a wrench that wasn't needed. The pot pinged under the slow drip like a lie dropping in sequence. "I boo," Emily said. "They knew your name," and the room thinned to wire. He shrugged and said, "People guess," and pretended to check the pipe. She watched his hands shake just once, a tremor he pretended was cold. Wind pressed the door, the chain rasped, and the night seemed to listen. Emily said, "Look at me," and the silence wrapped around them like plastic. Emily slipped into the spare room and called Marcus Bell, the one who always answered. She said, "Tell me I'm overreacting," and stared at the floor where shadows pooled. Marcus said, "Start from the top," and she let the story pour through the speaker like rain through a broken gutter. She described the caller, the laugh, the vanished dots, and Jason's trembling hands. Marcus was quiet long enough for the house to creak, then said, "Do you feel safe?" and the question snapped something delicate. Emily said, "Yes," too quickly, then softened, "Maybe." She paced between stacked boxes and the window's cold light. Marcus said, "Trust your gut and promise to come by tomorrow with coffee." Emily smiled at the thought, then felt silly for needing rescue. She said, "This is our place," and the words sounded like a rehearsal. He said, "It will be, if it's honest," and told her to breathe, eat, sleep. The call ended, and the quiet returned like a tide. Emily stood very still, listening for truth in the walls. The phone buzzed again, a new number, and Emily almost let it die. She answered, and a woman said, "I think you have something of mine," each word precise and careful. Emily said, "Who are you?" and felt the night sharpen. The woman said, "Lena," and paused long enough for thunder to fill the space. Lena added, "Tell Jason to bring the keys." He took, and Emily felt the floor slip half an inch. She said, "Keys to what?" But the line was already cooling. The house seemed to lean toward the question like a body toward heat. Emily texted, "Jason, call me now," and placed the phone on the table like a blade. She looked at the front door, at the rain, at the blueprint waiting like a promise on probation. She said, "I can handle this," and rolled her shoulders back. The pot tapped its slow rhythm, a countdown. In the street, a car idled and then moved on, taillights smearing red across wet asphalt. Emily set 2 cups on the counter as if company might arrive. The night did not blink. Morning crept in like a truce, and Emily Hart brewed coffee that smelled like a promise she could still keep. She traced the rim of a mug and said, "Today we make decisions," as if schedules could discipline dread. Jason Cole came from the hall with a careful smile and said, "I booked the tile guy," like a magician revealing a dove. The house brightened under thin sun, and she imagined friends laughing across a long table. Emily said, "We should pick the paint," and pulled a fan deck like a deck of futures. Jason touched a swatch and said, "This one feels warm," and she let his voice smooth the night's edges. She pictured their photos on the stairs, their coats on a shared hook, their arguments small and survivable. Emily said, "We are okay," and waited for the words to become true. Jason kissed her hair like a ritual he remembered by muscle memory. A truck rumbled past and she told herself the world moved forward. The phone lay screen down and silent, obedient for once. Emily stacked overtime spreadsheets beside appliance brochures like 2 versions of adulthood shaking hands. She said, "I can shift to nights for a month," and the sentence felt heavier than the stapler in her palm. Jason Cole said, "You don't have to," but his eyes flicked to the budget like a reflex he hated. She remembered skipping a trip last year so the down payment could breathe, and hope rose like a bruise. Emily said, "It's temporary," and circled a cheaper sink that still looked decent. Jason nodded and said, "Well, pay it back to ourselves," and the phrase landed like a bandage on a deep cut. She imagined a spring move-in date and a backyard string of lights. She imagined catching her breath there finally. The rain started again, a mild drizzle rattling the window screen like coins. Emily said, "I want this house," and felt the want root under her ribs. The phone flashed once and she turned it face down, granting herself a small gift of silence. Jason Cole returned from the hardware store humming a song he knew she liked, and placed a small plant on the counter like proof of tenderness. He said, "For the window," and she laughed despite herself. Emily Hart said, "It's sweet," and felt the word tug her toward the safer past. Jason opened a paint can and said, "Watch," rolling a test patch that glowed warm as toast. He talked about crown molding and weekend breakfasts, and the dog they might adopt. She watched the paint cover raw gypsum, a small mercy spreading. Emily said, "You remember the dog's name?" And he answered, "Scout," as if it had always been decided. He took her hand and said, "We're still us," and a part of her leaned into the sentence like a doorway. The test patch dried, duller but steady. She thought about Lena and the keys, and shoved the thought behind the plant. Emily said, "Let's finish this wall," and they moved in rhythm, 2 people painting the same future. Marcus Bell met Emily Hart at a diner that had never judged anyone, not even the pie. He said, "You look wrecked," and softened it with a grin that held worry. She told him about the plant and the paint, and how hope could mimic truth if you squinted. Marcus stirred his coffee and said, "Hope is not a receipt," and the line sat between them like a third chair. Emily said, "I want the world where he is honest," and the neon reflected in her cup like a warning. Marcus said, "Ask a clear question," and handed her a pen like a tool and a weapon. She wrote down 3 things she needed to know and folded the paper small. He said, "You do not owe anyone your confusion," and pushed the pie toward her with a nod. She laughed, then blotted her eyes with a napkin that smelled like lemon. The diner's door chimed, and for a second she thought it was Jason, but it wasn't. Emily said, "Tomorrow," and the words sounded like a climb. Evening dimmed the house to amber and shadow, and Emily Hart lit the pendant light like a stage cue. The phone rang, and Lena Ruiz said, "He still has the keys," voice flat as a ledger. Emily said, "What keys exactly?" and held the silence taut. Lena exhaled and said, "The River Street place," and the words landed with a cold clarity that tasted like metal. Emily glanced at the folded note Marcus had urged her to write. She said, "Why do you think I can reach him?" And Lena answered, "Because he comes home to you." The light hummed as if it too felt cornered. Emily said, "If this is a mistake, I will remember your name," and the line thinned, then ended. Jason Cole walked in with dust on his sleeves and said, "Dinner," and she looked at him as if the paint had not dried. She said, "We need to talk," and set 2 plates down like chess pieces. He nodded, careless or brave, and the room held its breath. The phone rang again near midnight, the sound slicing the unfinished walls like a knife. Emily Hart answered with a whisper, "Hello," but silence pressed back. A faint shuffle echoed, then a click. She stared at Jason Cole, asleep on the couch, his chest rising steady. She said, "Wake up," shaking his shoulder, but he blinked groggily and muttered, "Wrong number again." His tone was casual, but his hand slipped to his pocket where his phone sat dark. Emily's stomach tightened, suspicion crawling. The house creaked under the weight of unanswered questions. She pressed, "Who keeps calling us?" and he exhaled, "Scammers." His eyes avoided hers, focusing instead on the ceiling fan. The rain outside surged harder, drowning reason. Emily clutched the phone and whispered to herself, "They knew your name." Jason rolled over, pulling a blanket as if shielding himself from exposure. Morning light spilled into the kitchen, sharp and unkind. Emily Hart sorted through receipts, each slip of paper a breadcrumb of unease. One showed a hotel stay across town, dated last week. She said, "Jason, what is this?" He paused mid-sip of coffee, the mug hovering, then answered, "Work meeting." His voice cracked under the weight of the excuse. Emily pressed, "You didn't tell me." He shrugged. Didn't matter. She felt her pulse rise, each beat a drum against denial. Jason set the mug down too quickly, coffee sloshing. He muttered, "You don't trust me." Emily said, "I want the truth." The receipts rustled like dry leaves in her hand, each one carrying the shape of betrayal. She felt the room shrink, walls tightening with every unanswered question. Jason Cole painted a smile like fresh plaster, covering cracks with charm. He said, "Let's go out tonight, just us," voice soft as velvet. Emily Hart felt the words stick, honey laced with poison. She said, "Why now?" And his grin widened, rehearsed. He leaned close, brushing her hand, whispering, "Because we need to remember who we are." His touch carried heat, but her chest hollowed. He spoke of candlelight, of laughter, of a future still whole. Emily forced a nod, but doubt dripped steady inside her. She remembered Lena's voice and Marcus's warning, both louder than Jason's affection. He cupped her cheek, saying, "Don't let shadows ruin us." She smiled weakly, but her heart screamed for clarity. The lie hung fragrant, disguised as tenderness. At the cafe, Marcus Bell listened with his chin resting on one hand, eyes sharp but kind. Emily Hart said, "He lies like breathing," her voice shaking. Marcus replied, then stopped, waiting for him to choke. The hiss of the espresso machine filled silence. Emily traced circles on the napkin, her thoughts restless. She said, "What if I'm wrong?" Marcus leaned closer. "Truth doesn't vanish because you're afraid to see it." His voice was steady, grounding her storm. She remembered the folded note in her pocket, her own handwriting demanding answers. Marcus said, "You deserve clarity, not scraps." Emily's eyes stung, but she nodded. The cafe buzzed with laughter that felt foreign. She whispered, "I don't want to be broken." And Marcus answered, "Then don't let him hold the hammer." Emily Hart walked past the construction site near River Street and froze when she saw Lena Ruiz stepping out of a car. Lena adjusted her coat, locking the door of a small duplex. Emily whispered, "This is it," heart hammering. She stayed hidden behind a post, every nerve alive. Lena carried grocery bags inside, unaware of the eyes burning from across the street. Emily's mind raced. Jason's keys, Lena's voice, the receipts. The puzzle was shaping itself, each piece jagged. She said softly, "He's been building here too." The street was quiet except for a dog barking distantly. The new truth loomed, heavier than she had imagined. Her knees weakened, but she stayed still, unwilling to miss a detail. Shadows lengthened, hiding her but also trapping her. Emily Hart sat at the dining table, papers spread like wounds across the wood. Receipts, phone logs, and notes stared back at her, daring her to deny. She whispered, "It doesn't add up," and pressed her palm flat as if pinning truth in place. Jason Cole walked in, shoulders tight, jacket still on. Emily lifted a paper and said, "Explain this hotel bill." His mouth twitched before he muttered, "Work." She leaned forward, voice sharp. "Then why cash withdrawals in the same town?" His eyes flickered, darting like a cornered animal. The silence between them carried more weight than the words. Emily's chest ached, but her voice cut steady. "Tell me the truth, Jason." His jaw clenched, muscles hardening into defense. The air throbbed with electricity, thick and close. Jason Cole's voice broke into anger, like a match striking. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Stop digging!" Emily Hart flinched but held his stare. She said, "I wouldn't have to if you weren't burying something." His eyes narrowed, heat sparking into rage. He paced the room muttering, "You always doubt, always assume." Emily's hands trembled, but her voice steadied, "Because your lies smell louder than your words." Jason turned sharply, veins at his temples straining. He barked, "Drop it, Emily," but the sound felt desperate, not strong. She saw the mask slip for a second, fear underneath fury. She whispered, "You're hiding something, aren't you?" And the words hung heavy, undeniable. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden. Emily Hart froze, Jason Cole stiffened. She opened the door to find Lena Ruiz standing in the drizzle, umbrella dripping. Lena said flatly, "Jason, you left your keys again," and held out a ring heavy with unfamiliar shapes. Emily's heart seized as the metal clinked. She asked, "What house is this for?" Lena looked between them, realization dawning. Jason barked, "Go home, Lena," but his voice cracked. Emily said, "River Street," her throat dry. Lena didn't deny it, just nodded once, eyes pitying Emily. The world tilted, foundations split. Emily's breath came shallow, the truth at last clawing its way through. Emily Hart stumbled back into the kitchen, phone clutched like a weapon. She called Marcus Bell, voice breaking. She gave him keys. Marcus's voice came steady. "Which house?" Emily whispered, "River Street." Silence crackled. Then Marcus said, "That's where she lives, isn't it?" Her knees buckled against a chair. Jason shouted from the doorway, "Don't involve him." His voice felt hollow, echoes bouncing from cracked lies. Marcus urged, "You already know, Emily, you just need to face it." She shut her eyes, tears slipping free. She said, "He built 2 homes." Jason slammed the wall, but it only made his secrets louder. Emily Hart drove past River Street at dawn, the world hushed in pale gray. She parked across from the duplex and saw Lena Ruiz step out with a child, small and sleepy, clutching her hand. The sight gutted Emily, the truth now undeniable. She whispered, "He built a life here." Her breath fogged the glass as her heart cracked in silence. The child yawned and looked up, unaware of being the axis of a shattered world. Jason Cole had promised her forever, but his forever was split in 2. Emily's hand shook on the wheel. The folded note Marcus told her to write heavy in her pocket. She said, "This is the end," and turned the key, engine growling like anger waking. Emily Hart stood inside the half-finished living room, drywall dust clinging to her skin like ash. Jason Cole entered, eyes storm dark, and she said, "This is where you promised me forever." Her voice shook but carried steel beneath. Jason dropped his bag, muttering, "Stop making drama." She pointed at the blueprint spread across the floor. "This was ours, wasn't it?" He ran a hand over his face, silence cracking louder than denial. Emily's chest heaved as she shouted, "How many homes, Jason? How many lives?" He snarled back, "You don't understand." His voice ricocheted off bare walls. She stepped closer, fury filling the spaces lies had hollowed. "Then make me understand," she hissed, her fists trembling. The house seemed to tremble with them, beams creaking, storm rattling windows. Jason Cole's defenses splintered. He shouted, "I built this house for us and the other for survival." His words hit like falling bricks. Emily Hart gasped. "Survival? You call betrayal survival?" His jaw clenched, veins standing out. "I had debts, mistakes you don't know," he barked, pacing like a caged animal. She whispered, "And you thought 2 lives would fix 1 broken man?" His eyes flicked, shame bleeding into rage. He slammed his hand against the stud frame, dust raining down. Emily stood firm, voice rising. "You split yourself, and you split me too." His chest heaved, and silence sat sharp, the air too heavy to breathe. The front door banged open. Lena Ruiz stepped in, face pale, rain dripping from her coat. Behind her, the child clutched her hand, blinking at the storm inside. Emily Hart froze, every muscle seizing. Jason Cole swore under his breath, "Not here." Lena's eyes hardened. "They deserve to know," she said, voice sharp as glass. Emily whispered, "He has a child." The room spun, walls bending in betrayal. Jason snapped, "Lena, get out!" But the boy tugged her hand, staring at Emily with quiet curiosity. Emily's knees weakened, words breaking. "You built 2 families." Jason lunged toward Lena, but Emily stepped between them, her fury a barrier no blueprint could hold. Emily Hart's chest burned as tears cut hot rivers. She screamed, "I gave you everything." Her voice broke but did not falter. Jason Cole shouted back, "I never stopped loving you." But the words rang hollow in the storm. Lena Ruiz tightened her grip on the child, jaw clenched. Emily shook her head violently. "Love doesn't split across doorsteps, Jason." He reached for her, pleading, but she slapped his hand away, the sound sharp as thunder. Her voice dropped, trembling but lethal. "You humiliated me." Jason's eyes glistened, fear finally replacing fury. Dust swirled as if the house itself mourned the collapse. Jason Cole collapsed against the stud wall, his strength leaking out like water from a cracked pipe. Emily Hart stood over him, chest heaving, every word now a blade. "You built 2 homes, Jason, but you destroyed both." His head dropped, face hidden in shadow. Lena Ruiz whispered, "He can't have both worlds." Emily turned, her eyes locking with Lena's, and nodded. The child looked between them, innocence untouched, yet heavy with unspoken truths. Thunder split the sky, shaking the house. Emily's voice cut final, "This ends tonight." Jason groaned, "Please don't leave me." But the plea fell into dust and silence. Dawn seeped through the plastic sheeting, and Emily Hart swept dust into a pale hill that looked like ash. She said, "This mess is honest," and the words steadied her like a handrail. The house no longer pretended to be perfect, and neither did she. She boxed their photos, letting glass clink softly like distant bells. Jason Cole's jacket still hung on a nail. A flag from a country she would not visit again. She said, "I will count what remains mine," and stacked receipts like bricks. The silence felt earned, not empty. Outside, rain gutters clicked as if the sky were learning patience. She unplugged the charger and coiled the cord with careful fingers. She said, "I can do hard things," and felt the sentence land in her bones. Her phone buzzed with apologies she did not open. I. She left the broom propped like a truce and opened every window to let the truth breathe. Marcus Bell arrived with coffee and a notebook, and the house softened by a degree. Emily Hart said, "I need a list," and he drew lines like rungs on a ladder. They wrote bank calls, lock changes, and a new mailbox key. Marcus said, "You will not drown in this," and his voice sounded like a pier. She breathed deeper, counting small wins that could hold. He asked, "Where do you sleep tonight?" And she said, "Here," because leaving felt like defeat. They ate toast over a paint plank, crumbs stippling the map of their plan. He said, "You are not alone," and the sentence filled a room no lights could reach. She laughed once, short and real. The day brightened, and the new color on the wall looked less like a memory and more like a start. She said, "First locks, then light bulbs, then me." Jason Cole stood on the porch like weather that refused to pass, and Emily Hart cracked the door only as wide as sense. He said, "I can fix this," with a voice frayed by nights he had earned. She answered, "You can face it," and kept the chain latched. He spoke of debts and long shadows that needed two roofs to hide. She said, "Your shadow is your size," and watched his shoulders sag. He reached for the frame and let his hand fall, as if the wood had burned him. He said, "I'm sorry," and the apology landed like a coin in a fountain that had run dry. Wind moved through the maples, clapping a verdict she did not appeal. She said, "Send the truth in writing," and eased the door. His eyes searched for the old softness, but found glass. He stepped back, smaller than the storm, and she turned the deadbolt with a steady click. At a playground off River Street, swings creaked like old arguments, and Lena Ruiz watched a child chase light. Emily Hart said, "I am not your enemy," and felt the truth surprise them both. Lena nodded, careful, and answered, "I only want stability." They spoke in the shade, trading facts like fragile parcels. Emily said, "He owes you more than apologies," and Lena's jaw unclenched. The child laughed nearby, collecting leaves as if currency still existed. Lena whispered, "He promised both of us," and the sentence cracked and cleared the air. Emily said, "Send me documents, I will not be used to hide him," and a weight shifted off the bench. They sat longer than strangers usually do. When they rose, the swings rested. Emily said, "May he show up as a father, if not as a man," and Lena's eyes shone with tired grace. Night returned, but the house did not flinch, and Emily Hart tested each lamp until the rooms felt mapped. She carried the last box up the stairs, breath even, hands sure. She said, "I live here," and the syllables fit like keys turned with care. The plant Jason once offered sat in the window, leaves catching the city glow. She watered it anyway, choosing her own mercy. Marcus Bell texted, "Locks good?" and she answered, "Dawn," then silenced the phone without guilt. She walked the hallway, fingertips grazing fresh paint that no longer promised anything it could not keep. A small laugh escaped, not bright, but alive. She placed clean sheets on the bed, corners sharp as new vows. She said, "Tomorrow color," and set the roller tray by the door. Outside, the wind changed direction, and the house breathed with her. The house sat quiet under a pale dawn. Beams no longer creaked like accusations, but like bones settling into place. Emily Hart brewed coffee, steam lifting soft and unhurried. She whispered, "This silence is mine," and the sentence carried like prayer. The walls still bore stains of betrayal, yet each nail and joint hummed with her survival. She opened a window and felt air rush in, fresh, cool, unburdened. Jason Cole's ghost lingered in memory, but his absence was no longer weight, only echo. Emily said, "I built this too," touching the frame where plaster would one day cover scars. Outside, sparrows broke the stillness, their wings fast and bright. She smiled faintly, grief not erased but steadied. The knock at the door was softer than storms, but carried the same threat. Emily Hart hesitated, then opened to find Jason Cole, shoulders hunched, eyes raw. He whispered, "One last chance," voice frayed. She said, "You've used them all," firm as stone. His breath faltered, mouth working, but no defense arrived. He reached out, fingers trembling, as if to claim what no longer belonged. Emily's spine straightened, her silence sharper than any blade. He whispered, "I'm nothing without you." And she answered, "Then learn who you are." The air held still, the chain of the lock gleaming like finality. Jason stepped back, defeated, swallowed by the morning gray. Emily Hart walked through the half-finished rooms, each beam and joint a reminder of promises cracked but not binding her anymore. She said aloud, "I choose me," and the words echoed warm. She touched the wall where Jason had once drawn a heart in chalk, then wiped it clean with one stroke. She unpacked books into a shelf, their spines neat, order reclaiming chaos. A laugh rose, small but true, as she placed a photo of herself and Marcus Bell at a cafe, her smile unguarded. She whispered, "I am not ruined," and felt her body believe it. The house no longer mourned, it prepared. On River Street, Lena Ruiz locked the door while the child skipped ahead, laughter bright in the gray air. Emily Hart watched from her car, not hiding, not trembling. She thought, "He tied us both to lies, but truth untied us." Lena glanced back, eyes meeting Emily's across the street, not enemies but survivors. Emily nodded once, slow, and Lena returned it with quiet respect. The child waved at Emily, not knowing the weight of bridges burned. Emily lifted her hand in reply, heart lighter. The street felt different now, not prison but release. She whispered, "We will not carry his shadow." Night descended again, soft and steady. Emily Hart lay in bed, a single lamp casting golden calm. She whispered, "This is my house now," and the silence answered like a vow. Her phone buzzed once, Jason Cole's name glowing, but she let it die in the dark. She turned the device face down, final and clean. Outside, wind traced the roof, not storm but lullaby. She closed her eyes and smiled, small and sure. The final blow came not with a scream but with refusal, the quiet severing of a chain. Tomorrow would bring repairs, paint and light. Tonight brought peace, sharp as justice, soft as mercy.